Good to see everyone this morning. Appreciate y'all being here. And yes, ma'am, I received the instruction. Continue to pray for Brother Wayne. It feels weird to be in here for Sunday school and Brother Wayne not be over here talking and giving me a bunch of grief before I go up and try and teach. And so pray for him as he's recovering from his knee surgery. And pray for, by the way, the three ladies in the back sitting with my wife and daughter. That is, two of them are my sisters. And then Nevaeh back there is my sister's daughter. And so they came down to be with us for Grady's graduation, and we appreciate them coming. And pray for my nephew's wife. She is sick and in the hospital. And who else was I supposed to pray for? Oh, yes, Little Debbie, for those of y'all that come to the camp, and Little Debbie that comes and helps with the salad bar and stuff, and her dad comes too, but I think he fell and cracked his hip or whatever, and he was back in the hospital and have to have a surgery, and so pray for them. Okay, if you have your Bible, turn to Genesis chapter number 28. We will not stay here long, but we will hit this and we will work our way over to Genesis chapter number 35. But we will start in Genesis chapter number 28 this morning. And so, for those of you who were here last week, y'all should remember we were teaching on Jacob, but we were teaching on what I want us to look at, what we're going to look at for the next few weeks, Lord willing, is Bethel, the house of God. And so the first mention of it is obviously Jacob. And again, I'm not going to reteach last week's Sunday school lesson, but Jacob was told to leave by his parents. Has told, hey, you're going to have to go. We want you to go back to Rebekah's homeland and find your wife there, because they couldn't deal with Esau's Canaanite wives, and also because of what happened, and they found out that Esau wanted to do harm to Jacob, because he'd not only got the birthright, but he also stole the blessing. And so Jacob is forced out on his own, and when he's forced out on his own, we're going to see this. It's actually going to play a part three different times, but he's in distress, and so he comes to this place that first night, and he goes to sleep, and he has that dream of the ladder and the angels ascending and descending. And I didn't even bring up last week how that Jesus mentions that in the New Testament, but there is where God speaks to Jacob in that place of distress. And so it says in verse 16, it says, and Jacob awaked out of his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. and he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? There's none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took a stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And I think that's pretty much where I got to last week, was basically at the end right there, where I said he turned his pillow into a pillar. And verse number 19 says, and he called the name of the place Bethel, again, the house of God, but the name of the city was called at first Luz at the first. In verse number 20, this is the only reason why I'm bringing up this chapter right here, because we didn't get to this. In verse number 20, it says, Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone, which I have set for a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the tenth unto thee. So a couple things in there. The lesser of the two is it is interesting that before Moses gave the law about tithing, Abraham and Jacob both said, "Hey, we're going to give a tenth." So for those people that try to make it out like tithing is something that was done under the law that doesn't need to be done anymore, this predated the law. But the thing about this is, it says that in verse 20, Jacob vowed a vow. And I thought about that, and I thought, I wonder if I went around the room, and obviously I'm not going to do that. I've done that before. We've done that before. Brother Tyrone will remember when I did that. But I've went around the room before, and at that time we went around the room. It took a couple Sundays, but we went around the room and had everyone give their testimony of salvation. Just tell me your testimony. Everyone's story's a little different. It was interesting that mine and Brother Tyrone's had a lot of similarity to it, but everyone's testimony was a little different. But it was good. I think it was good. And so, but I wonder if I handed the microphone to everyone and say, "Hey, tell me a vow that you vowed to God." And then if I went to the next statement is, "Tell me a vow that you vowed to God, but you hadn't paid it." Tell me something you said, "God, if you do this, I'll do this." And God did his part, but you didn't do your part. God did his part. God took care of you. God, whatever it was that, God healed your person you were praying for. God did this, and you said, "God, if you do this, then I'll start doing this." And God did his part, but you hadn't kept up on your part. And so we're going to see that. We're going to see that in Jacob's life, because honestly, he didn't push for a lot. He didn't push for basically 4 wives. He didn't push for 12 children. He didn't push for all these cattle and all these sheep and all these herds. He didn't push for any of that, Matthew. But we're going to see that's what God gives him. All he said was, "I need food and I need clothing, and come back to my father's house in peace." That's all he asked for, and God gave him so much more. And so that's what we're going to see. So we're going to get to chapter number 35, but I want us to get there. And so in chapter number 29, and y'all know that for those of you who were here when I went through Joseph, y'all know that I can get bogged down. I'm doing my best not to do that. But in chapter number 29, Jacob arrives in Haran. He arrives in Haran. And he shows up, and there's a well there, and there's people standing around with the sheep at the well, and so he walks up and he calls them brethren. It's in verse 4. He says, "My brethren, whence be ye?" And they said, "Of Haran are we." And in verse number 5, he says, "And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him." And so he's like, hey, he's doing what his mom and dad asked him to do. He said, hey, they said, "We want you to go to this house, and we want you to find a wife there." And so he says, "Know ye Laban?" And they said, "We know him." And verse number 6, I was reading this the other day. I think maybe Adrian and Aaron were in the room. They kind of laughed at me because I said something. But it says, and he said unto them, "Is he well?" And they said, "He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep." Now, Jacob didn't know everything that was involved in that right there. Well, they said, "Behold," and Jacob in just a verse or two down, Jacob's going to turn around and behold. It wasn't just Rachel his daughter, but Jacob said, "That's not Rachel, Laban's daughter. That's Rachel, that she's about to be my wife." And so in verse number 9 it says, "And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept." Now, I will say, if you're dating in here, if you're of dating age, I do not recommend, because we are trying to be Christians here, I do not recommend the first time you see the girl that you think you're going to marry to walk up and kiss her. Let's not do that. And also, let's also not cry, because that's usually not the best thing to do whenever you first meet the girl you're going to marry. But it worked out well for Jacob. It worked out fine for him. But I did see it also interesting that here's these people, here are multiple people standing around a well, and Jacob's kind of like, hey boys, like what's going on here? What's going on here? Like why are all these sheep standing around a well? And they're like, well, they come and remove the stone for us. But whenever Rachel showed up and with those sheep, Jacob said, here, watch this. And watch how strong I am. Brother Dakota, I just got this picture of Jacob like, hey, let me show you how strong I am. So where it says they removed the stone, Jacob said, we don't need a they. I'll remove the stone for you and pick that stone up. And it's funny how as a young man you feel your oats a little bit, and you want to be strong, you want to be tough, and you want to do all those things. And especially whenever you meet the woman you want to marry, you want her to think you're strong. So it was interesting that I saw that in Jacob right there. So Jacob and Rachel come up to the house, and he come up to Laban's house, and Laban is so excited to see him. He's so excited to see him, and in verse number 14, he basically, Jacob just spends a month there. And verse 15, and Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Jacob said, I have been waiting on this question right here. I have been waiting for this question. I'm so excited. I'm so happy that you asked this question. In verse number 18 it says, Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. He said, 7 years. I'll give you 7 years of my life if you say I can marry your daughter. Thankfully, we don't really do it that way nowadays. Because Joseph, you'd be in about year 2. You'd have 5 years to go. You know what I mean? Like Jake, you'd be getting close. You'd be getting close. But Ben, yeah, long way. But you understand what I'm saying? Like we don't do it that way. But he said 7 years, and Jacob said, deal, sign me up. And so it says that in verse 20, it says, and Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days. And for those of us that have gotten a little older, the time does seem to pass pretty quickly. But Jacob was not an old man in this time. But because of his love for Rachel, it just seemed as a few days, 7 years. But he didn't realize that who he was dealing with. Jacob, whose name is trickster or schemer, had a father-in-law who was also a trickster and a schemer. And so Jacob says, hey, it's been 7 years. Where's my wife? It's time for me to, it's time. And so Laban says, yes, sir. We'll put it on. Everything's going to be ready to go. We're going to do this upright. And they make a great feast. They gather all the men of the place and make a feast. And so Jacob goes in thinking he's going to Rachel, and he wakes up in the morning and looks and says, you're not Rachel. You're Leah. What just happened to me? So he can't do anything with Leah. It's not her fault. So he goes to Laban, says, what in the world? And he said, listen, in our country, it's a custom. You can't let the younger get married before the older. So we had to let the older girl get married. I'm really sorry about that. And he's like, but we agreed on Rachel. And he said, sure, I got a great deal for you. 7 more years for Rachel. He said, if you'll fulfill her week, and I'm skipping stuff here. If you'll fulfill her week, then I'll give you Rachel, but you got to work for me 7 more years. So it cost him 14 years of his life to have Rachel, but he said, deal, sign me up, because I love Rachel. And so, so he finally works out his 14 years. He's married to Rachel. He's also married to Leah. And again, I've mentioned this before in the past, but we're not gonna judge with 2026 values what happened in this story right here. And so at the end of chapter 29, God sees that Jacob loves Rachel and not Leah, and so God opens Leah's womb, and Leah starts having children. And so then, and I know this is going to surprise you, but in a house with two women, the women couldn't get along. I know that's so surprising. It's just so weird to imagine that two women couldn't get along. But in a house with two women, they couldn't get along. And so there comes this struggle, and the struggle goes throughout chapter number 29 and into chapter number 30. And Leah's having children, and Rachel's not having children, and then Rachel's like, well, fine, I may not be able to have a child, but here's my maid. You can have her and have children with her. And then Leah's not having children, so she's like, well, fine, I want to have more children, so here's my maid. You can have children with her. And then finally, God opens Rachel's womb, and she bears Joseph. So now we have 11 boys and a girl. And so now here's Jacob, and he's got all these wives, and he's got all these children, and now he's working for Laban, but he's not working for Rachel and Leah anymore. And so they come up with a plan. Laban and Jacob come up with this plan of, hey, here's how we're going to pay you. And Matthew could probably explain this. He could probably explain this better than anybody. But somehow, in the 14 years that Jacob was serving for Rachel, really that's who he was serving for. In those 14 years, he watched them cows and he watched them sheep, and he said, I've noticed something. I've noticed if this is going on, then the cow that's going to be born from that is going to look like this. And if this is going on, then the cow that's going to be born from that looks like this. And so because he was dealing with Laban said, all right, you can have the ring staked or the speckled or whatever. And so Jacob said, deal. And so then Jacob would do whatever he would do. And I'm just skipping over here, but he would do those things. And when he would do those things, then that's how all the cattle would be born that way. And Laban would come and he'd scratch his head and say, no, we're changing your wages. We're changing your wages. Now you can't have the ring stake, but you can have the speckled. And Jacob said, deal again. And so then he would change things up, and now they're all born speckled. And him and Laban had this little thing going back and forth. Now, Laban would change his wages, and Jacob say, fine with me, and then whatever was being born was born however he changed. And so Laban and his sons get to looking around and say, man, Jacob has stolen everything our father had. And there was an argument between them. And basically Jacob told him, he said, hey, you didn't have anything before I came. You didn't have anything before I came, but God blessed you because of me. God blessed you because of me, and you didn't have anything, and now all of a sudden you think like everything should be yours, but God was blessing you because of me, and now God has blessed me, and now y'all are upset about it. And so you get to chapter number 31, chapter number 31, and God tells Jacob, all right, it's time to go. He spent about 20 years of his life. Here, and now he's rich. He's got cattle, he's got sheep, he's got wives, he's got children, he's got everything a man could want. But there's this thing that's been lingering in the back of his mind this whole time. And that's, if I go home, I'm going to have to face my brother. If I go home, I'm going to have to see Esau. And Esau promised, he said, hey, I'm going to kill Jacob. And what Jacob knew about Esau was that Esau intended to do what he said he was going to do. He might not be the most intelligent man in the world. He might sell his birthright for a bowl of soup. But if he said, I'm going to kill him, he meant what he said. And so here is in chapter number 31. I skipped a part. Let me get back to that. In chapter number 31, something happens here in verse number 19 of chapter 31. Says, and Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. And so they were idolaters. Laban was an idolater. Laban's sons were idolaters. And guess what? Laban's daughters were idolaters. They didn't serve Jehovah God. They served another God. And so she takes those images. And we know that Laban finally, after 3 days, realizes that they're gone, and he comes after them, and him and Jacob have this big conflict. And Jacob says something he shouldn't have said, because he didn't realize that Rachel had taken those images, and so he said something, and so Laban goes throughout the tents and looks, and Rachel's in there, and she lies and says, hey, is it okay if I don't get up, because it's not a good time for me to get up. Let me phrase it that way. It's not a good time for me to get up, if you understand what I'm saying. And so he's like, sure. And so Jacob's like, you see, I told you I didn't have anything. And all the time she had that image hidden. And so God had told Laban, he said, you can't say good or bad. You can't say good or bad to Jacob. And Jacob and Laban make this covenant. They make this covenant, and they agree, and then now it's time for Jacob to continue his journey towards Esau. And so in chapter number 32, he's continuing his journey toward Esau, and they've told him, like, hey, Esau's coming with 400 of his men, and Jacob's like, hey, it's just me and a few servants and my wives and my children and my cattle, and I'm not going to be able to I can't stand up against Esau, number one, but I sure can't stand up against 400 men. And so he's in distress again. He's in distress. And so in verse number 24, now Jacob again he's done all he can physically in his power and his mind. He's like, okay, I've done what I can to get this figured out. And so, but in verse number 24 it says, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? I remember many years ago at church camp, Brother Tony Jones preached on this. What is thy name? And it's a big day. It's a big day in everyone's life, Brother Dakota, when we have to admit to God who we are. He said Jacob, but he had to admit it wasn't just my name is Jacob, but I am that trickster. I am that schemer. That is who I am. And it's a big day for us, Chris, when we have to just look at God and say, God, you already know who I am. He knew who his name was. He knew it was Jacob. But sometimes you have to come to yourself and say, hey, this is who I am, God. This is who I am. This is what I am. And so he said, what is your name? And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and men, and hast prevailed. And so Jacob has this experience, but remember again, this experience came because he was in distress. Some people don't like to get put under stress. They don't like to be put in distress. They want everything to be easy street. They want everything to just be peaches and cream and roses, and just everything is great. But I have found in my flesh, and I'm assuming you would probably say the same thing. If everything's going great, but when you're in distress, you're like, God, please help me. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. But I've found that that's how my flesh is. That if everything's going good, I'm like, I'm doing pretty good. But it's when I get into stress, that's when I have to bear down and work on my relationship with God and work on those things that God wants worked on, that we should work on without being in distress, but we just don't. We just don't. And you say, a lot of times you hear someone say, why is God doing this to me? Because he wants to do something for you. That's why God's doing this for you, to you. Why is God allowing this to happen in my life? Well, ask him, not me. Ask him, and honestly, for the most part, we probably already know. We probably already know, and because judgment didn't first begin at the house of God, because we didn't deal with it our own self, then we had to be judged. We had to be. God had to do something. God had to put us in pressure. God had to put us under pressure. He had to put us under stress to bring us back, to take us away from something, to take something from us, to get us to draw closer. And so each time that Jacob's in distress, you see that's when him and God have these conversations. And so in in chapter number 33, that's when the meeting with Esau occurs, and you know what? God took care of it. God took care of it. God just took care of it, and so God takes care of it, and now Jacob has come back to the land of his birth, and he's back in that land, and yet there's a problem. He had food. He had raiment. He come back to the land of his birth, but he doesn't go back to Bethel. He doesn't pay his vow. In chapter number 34, chapter 34 is a very sad chapter. At the beginning of chapter 34, it says, "And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land." What she said and what she did was two different things. And I'm afraid that happens a lot of times. Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I'm going to go do this. And that's not what they go do. Hey, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be here. And that's not what they do. Hey, I'm just going down here. And that's not what they do. And we got men's home guys here. And I appreciate. I hope I say it. I hope I say it enough that y'all know. I appreciate every one of y'all being in here. Every one of y'all that's in here that listens to me teach Sunday school. I appreciate y'all. But sometimes like people just they just played the game so long they just don't know how not to play the game. And y'all remember we had one of the men's home guys get busted because his girlfriend was bringing something she shouldn't have brought and threw it out on the road, and he's like, "I'm just gonna go walk up and down the fence line." You're gonna get caught. You're gonna get caught. You know, you're gonna get caught. Watch how slick I am. Well, guess what? Guess how slick he caught him? He got him back in jail is what it got him. He got him back in jail. And she's like, "Hey, I'm just going to go out. I just want to go see the daughters of the land." Verse 2, "And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her." I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to go down there and see them. I'm just going to go see the daughters of the land. I'm just going to be nice to them and just say a few. I'm not doing anything. I'll guarantee you, if you had asked Dinah before she walked out the door that day, there's no way she'd have said, "Hey, I'm gonna lose my virginity down here in Shechem. I'm gonna be defiled when I walk out the door today." That's not what she would have said. But that's what happened. And a lot of times we don't intend for it. But if that's the direction you're going, guess what? That's where you're going. You say, "Well, I didn't mean to get there." Well, guess what? If you get in your truck and you get on I-75 South, you're going to end up in Atlanta. That's where you're going. You're like, well, I didn't mean to go that far. I only wanted to go to Cartersville. Well, if you don't stop when you get to Cartersville, you're going to end up in Atlanta. And you start hanging out with the daughters of the land, or hanging out with the boys of the land. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? And so in this chapter right here, the dad of Mr. Shechem goes and says, hey, we really, my boy loves your daughter. And Jacob comes off pretty bad in this chapter right here, just to be honest with you. But my boy loves your daughter, and we would like to kind of make some allegiance with we would like for your sons to have our daughters, and we'd like for our sons to have your daughters, and we'd like to kind of make this thing. And some of the boys step up and say, whoa, wait a second. Jacob doesn't say it. The boys say, okay, well, if you want to, let's make a deal. Let's make a deal, and they come up with something they want them to do, and the men said, deal. And so the men of the city go out and they do it, and they're like all excited. They're like, hey, we're going to be able to intermingle with these. And as soon as 3 days, I think 3 days was up, they said, hey, all right. And I think Simeon and Levi go out, and they just kill the men. They kill the men. And not only do they kill the men, but in verse number 27, the sons of Jacob come upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses and that which was in the city and that which was in the field, and all their wealth and all the little ones and their wives took they captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me, to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and among the Perizzites, and I being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, I and my house. I will say it's interesting, again, like I said, and it just happens. It just happens. You don't intend for it to be that, but that's why we have revivals, because it just happens, Brother Dakota. You just start getting cold. You just get a little cold, and you're like, man, we're in church Sunday morning, we're in church Sunday night, we're in church Wednesday night, and we shouldn't get that way, but we just do. We just get a little cold, and then we have family camp, and it's just an opportunity to bring you out and wake you up and get you focused back in on God. And here's Jacob, and he's had this experience, and God said, hey, you're a prince with God, you got power with God, but instead of using his princeness and his power with God, he says, I can't believe what y'all done with me. You done to me, boys. I now stink. I now stink to the men of this land, and they're going to come and destroy me and destroy my stuff, and it just happens. Verse 31, and they said, should he deal with our sister as with a harlot? So you get to chapter number 35, and so that was a long introduction, and I've got 10 minutes. That was my long introduction to get to chapter 35. And God said unto Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel. Jacob should have went to Bethel on his own, but God had to tell him, arise, go to Bethel. Arise, go to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. So God said, hey, Jacob, I'm going to remind you that you made a vow, and now I'm going to ask you to pay that vow. Verse number 2, this is my Father's Day Sunday School. This is Father's Day Sunday School. Verse number 2. Then Jacob said unto all his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you. If you remember, Rachel took her father's God and she hid it. These boys took captive the girls from the land, and they spoiled it. And I believe they also spoiled their little idols, their little gods that they worship. They spoiled them. You're gonna see. I'm gonna read it in a second. But he said, "Hey, I've let this go on in my house too long. I've let this go on in my house too long. I've let things in my house that I know should not be in my house. And we're going to the house of God, and we cannot go to the house of God like we are. Now, I'm gonna say this just to make sure no one misunderstands me. If you're lost, come as you are. If you've never been born again, if you're not saved, come as you are and get saved, and God will clean you up. But if you are a Christian, if you have been saved, if you have been born again, that's a whole different story. And you've just gotten cold, you've just gotten lax, you've just kind of let some things go, you've let some things in, you started doing some things you'd stop doing, but now you're doing them again, or you said you would never do, and now you're doing those things. And Jacob said, guys, all right, listen, it's my house, y'all are the ones doing it, but it's me, I'm the one that should have put a stop to it. I'm the dad of this house, and if y'all remember from our story of Joseph, like they said, yes sir to Jacob all the way through. When it come time to go get corn out of Egypt, they weren't allowed to go get corn until Jacob said it was okay to go get corn. So those boys, except for this little thing Reuben's going to do something a little bit later, but Simeon and Levi, it was yes sir. Jacob was the boss of that house. And Jacob said, hey, we need to put away the strange gods that are among you. You guys are the ones that have them. You brought them in, but I let them stay there. I think Matthew, somewhere he saw that Rachel had it, and he said, I probably ought to say something about that, but I just didn't. I probably should, but I don't. You know how it is with your wife. You don't want to start a fight. And you're like, is it worth a fight? It's not that big a deal. Like she loves God. She loves my God more than that little God. And then they brought those other things in, and now they got them, and he said, put them away. And be clean. I don't have time to read verses, but I had some verses in Isaiah. Actually, I may read the verse in Isaiah and Ezekiel. It says in verse number 16, wash you, make you clean, put away the evil of your doings from before mine eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do well, seek judgment, relieve the oppressed, judge the fatherless, plead for the widow. Come now. Let us reason together, saith the Lord, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Many times, starting in Exodus and working your way through, God says, hey, you need to clean yourself up. You need to clean yourself up. You need to be clean. If you're going to come before me, you need to come to me clean. And I don't think that's just a bath. I don't think that's just a bath. And then he said, and change your garments. Matthew, they look just like the world. If someone walked by, they wouldn't have said, hey, and y'all understand what I'm about to say here. Hey, that looks like a Christian right there. That's not what they said. They said, hey, that looks just like the Perizzites. That looks just like the Shechemites, the Canaanites. That looks just like they went to the world stores and bought the world's clothes, and whatever was in style, that's what they wore. My sister's in here, and so she'll remember Mr. Ewing said, when I was in the 7th grade, Mr. Ewing said, I kept my bell bottoms. I'm like, well, that's crazy. We're talking 1988, 1989. He said, I kept my bell bottoms. And we're like, that's the craziest thing. He said, everything comes back in style. And you know what? They come back in style. Bell bottoms come back in style. He's like, they're going to come back in style. When they come back in style, I'm going to wear them. And so Mr. Ewan was also the teacher that asked my younger sister, why can't you just be like your brother? But she couldn't, because she's not. But anyway, so here is Jacob. He said, change your garments. He said, I'm tired of seeing we look just like the world. There's no way no one can tell us any different. No one knows any different. They don't realize we're any different. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And look at what it says right here. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand. They didn't know he was going to say this. They didn't know he was going to say this, but because of what Simeon and Levi did, they were in distress, and because they were in distress, you know what they grabbed? They grabbed they grabbed their little G gods and held on to their little G gods. And so they're all standing there in a future word, in their Babylonian garments, in their Canaanitish garments. They're all standing there in their Canaanitish garments, and they've got their little G gods in their hand. And I'm going to say a lot of us have our little G God in our hand. And you say, it's not my God. Well, let me see your screen time. Let me see your screen time. And I get it. Like, it's a tool, it's a phone, you use it for a phone. Well, if it's just a phone, then get a flip phone. I fought as long as I could, Matthew. People are like, how do you do? I'm like, I could text on the flip phone. I could text on the flip phone. 333, you know, I could do it. I fought as long as I could, and it's a work phone. I don't have a personal phone, but then I got it, and then it's like, man, I can check my emails. So I check my emails. Oh, I can look this up. I can do this. But then there's so much more. I can check sports scores. I can check this. I can see what's going on in politics. I can see this. Oh, look at YouTube. I can learn how to fix a tractor. I can learn how to fix a starter. I can learn how to do this. Oh, look at that. That's pretty interesting. Next thing you know, you got 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours on the phone a day. And tell me it's not your God. Tell me it's not your God. Do you spend that much time with your God? Do you spend that much time praying? Do you spend that much time reading your Bible? They had it in their hand. They had it in their hand. And a lot of times we have the same thing. We've got our little G God in our hand. I'm stressed out. Oh, I better watch some videos. Whew, I feel better. Oh, I'm stressed out. Let me shop. Ladies, let me go on Amazon and order a bunch of stuff, because I get this little dopamine hit whenever the Amazon packages show up, and it just makes me feel good because something came to the house today. I'm just going to shop. And you've taken the place. You've used your phone to take a place of your relationship with God. You've used the phone to take the place of your relationship with God. Like in a time in before where when you're in distress, you would go back and say, God, please help me. Now you're like, I'll just watch Mark Rober. That'll be funny. And I'll just laugh. And laughter doeth good like a medicine. I'll just feel better. I'll just have a good laugh. I'll just play some games. I'll just play Candy Crush or whatever. I don't even know games because I don't play the game. I'll just play the game, and I'll just feel good because it's a little ching 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 ching, and it makes a little noise, and it'll just make me happy. And instead of letting God deal with you, you self-medicate with the little G God you got in your hand. You self-medicate with the little G God you got in your hand and say, I don't feel so bad anymore. I can go sleep now. And maybe God woke you up because he wanted you to pray for somebody. Maybe God woke you up because he wanted to talk to you. Maybe God woke you up because he wanted to deal with you. But you self-medicated with this and said, I don't need you, God. I got this. I got this. Can you go to sleep at night and say, God, I just want to thank you. I know I'm out of time. God, I want to thank you so much for my cell phone. I want to thank you so much for that cell phone. I mean, anytime I want to see something, I can see it. Anytime I want to hear something, I can hear it. Anytime if I want happiness, I can get happiness out of it. If I want something sad, I can find something sad. God, really, I'll be honest with you, God, I don't even need you, God, because I got a phone. They had their gods in their hand because they were in distress. And the thing that was most precious of them was what they were holding in their hands. And he said, give them to me. Give them to me. Thank you.